Yes, we'll see if that is raised. That's good. You have some responses.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Oh, I do that. Oh, yeah. No, I do that. Yeah, thank you.
Kind of like he does it, I think. Well, that is always like one piece.
Yeah, same. Kind of gets one per day. Every once in a while.
I'm maybe one for day, like one on Saturday, one on Sunday.
I'm not going to so, like, my brother would do that.
It matters, it doesn't. He's in a basketball game with Calvin. Yeah, it's fun. I saw your 7.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Planning Commission meeting for January 21st, 2020. I just want to do that. I wasn't sure if you do it in the beginning and the end, or just the end, or does it matter? Drew said, yeah, Drusha said it was really maybe a choice. It's been a long time. I don't remember. May we have a roll call, Emily?
Sure.
Thank you.
Commissioner Tarnay?
Here.
Commissioner Hall?
Here.
Vice Chair Riley?
Here.
And Commissioner Freeman?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gov is noted as absent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And at this time, I'd like to invite the audience to join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand if you'd like.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. At this time, I would like to open our agenda to public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone to come up and speak to the Planning Commission on any item that isn't on the agenda tonight. If you choose to come up to the podium, we ask that you state your name, as well as keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. If anyone is interested. Yeah, I don't see anyone racing to the podium. So I will close public comment, and we will move on to item number 5, which is a selection of officers. We will be selecting our Planning Commission chair and vice chair this evening. Do we start with chair or vice chair?
You can pick whichever one you want. I do have a prepared statement from Commissioner Gove to read, if I may.
Yes,
And he
please.
says, I can't make the meeting tonight, but I would like to nominate Nikki Riley as Planning Commission Chair and would accept a nomination for co-chair if such nomination is made. So work with whichever one you want to do first and open up with nominations. So right now, whichever one you're picking.
Okay, well, we could start with the nomination by Dave Gove to nominate me as chair. Does anyone else want to comment on that, or
That motion.
any discussion? Okay, then do we do a roll call? Or, yeah, or,
Sure, that would be great.
okay.
Commissioner Tarnay?
Yes.
Commissioner Hall?
Yes.
Vice Chair Riley?
Yes.
And Commissioner Freeman?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm excited to serve as chair of the Planning Commission. And now we will move to vice chair. I would like to nominate Dave Gove. He has expressed an interest. Would anyone like to second that or discuss that option?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Okay, then we'll make a motion to,
Do you want to consider any other nominations?
does anyone want to talk about it or have any reservations or want to offer a different proposal for vice chair?
I mean, I would also
wanna talk about
definitely entertain Commissioner Tarnay as vice chair.
Do you want to speak to that?
It's so funny because we can't discuss it outside of here, and so I hadn't really thought about it, but I would be happy to do it. I would be thrilled. I love planning commission, and extra planning commission is extra good.
I had been approached about Dave's interest. I don't think there's a conflict in someone sharing that. I think it's a conflict if we lobby multiple members. So I think I'm leaning towards Dave Gove because he has talked with me about it multiple times. Do you guys want to have a discussion about where your preferences are, or we could just, I need a second. We got a second for Dave, but then we went to offering a motion for you to be vice chair. So I guess would we want a second motion for Susie? This is kind of new
So
to
typically
me.
what you would do is you would do a roll call for the first nomination, and then you could do a roll call for the second nomination.
Okay. with our four here on the dais. Okay, so why don't we go? Could we have a discussion, or
Sure.
would it be better if?
Yeah, no, go ahead and discuss it. Yeah.
So I shared my thoughts or my leanings. I don't know if Dan, you have any thoughts. I know you're somewhat new, but if you come with an opinion or.
I don't know if I have a strong opinion one way or the other. I mean, I would support Dave being vice chair also.
I'm not going to arm wrestle him for it. It's okay.
I guess one concern, it seems like Dave's recusing himself from a lot of meetings, so I think that's something to consider.
Yeah, I have thought that as well. I think we could take that into consideration. He had mentioned he was gone tonight for family business, but he would be recusing himself from item 8.1, is that correct? Or if he has an adjacency?
Yeah. For 8.1, yes.
Yeah. I think it's a consideration.
Why don't we do the roll call?
Okay.
I don't understand how this goes.
Okay, so what we'll do is the nomination right now is for Commissioner Gove for vice chair. So we can just do a roll call for that.
Okay.
We already had a second, so I'm free to do that if you want, Emily. Commissioner Tarnay. It's a little awkward because we don't typically have two nominations at the same time, but procedurally that's how we're supposed to do it.
I have nothing against Dave, but I'm going to say no.
Okay. Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Vice Chair Riley,
Yes.
and excuse me, Commissioner Freeman.
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That was a little more convoluted than I had hoped. I think I wasn't expecting interest, but that's actually exciting and wonderful. And then we have another go around. Okay, with that, let's move to the approval of the minutes. I will say I think the agenda needs to be corrected. They state approval of the minutes from November 19th, 2019, but I believe it's December 17th, 2019. So with that, did anyone have any comments or corrections or anything that they wanted to draw attention to?
I'll make a motion to approve the December 17th meeting minutes.
Great. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Great. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Tarnay,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Chair Riley,
Yes.
and Commissioner Freeman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Let's move now to our public hearing portion of the evening. This is a minor review item. It's item number 7.1, application number 2019-50149. It's a tentative map amendment time extension. I was going to quickly go over my interest in the procedures before Jamie takes the mic in terms of.
Before you do that, let's introduce her again because some of you don't recognize Jamie. She is a previous town employee. She was our senior planner and has come back to work for us again part-time. So welcome, Jamie.
Yay, welcome, Jamie. We go way back, like pre-children, and going to date ourselves. But it's so wonderful to see you. It's great to see your face. But I wanted to just kind of go over for the audience my desire as well as the commissioners for procedures this evening. I thought we would have the staff make their presentation. The applicant would make a presentation if they desired, and then we would open it up for public comment. And then Planning Commission would direct questions to staff. We would direct questions to the applicant. Ideally, we can kind of separate those if possible, and then we would move into deliberations. So I just wanted to kind of give an overview of how I'd like to run things this evening, and that would apply as well to item 8.1. So with that, now we'll move to you, Jamie.
Good evening, Commissioners. Tonight we have for your consideration the Anderson tentative map time extension. And the project is located just to the north of the Armstrong Tract, kind of on the western end of town. And there are some acreage parcels up there. Just a quick project overview regarding the request. It's a 1-year time extension to a previously approved tentative map, and I'll go into more detail on that in just a few minutes here. Some background on this property. In March of 1963, the Armstrong Tract subdivision Phase 2 was recorded to subdivide all of this acreage area into smaller parcels similar to Phase 1 of the Armstrong Tract. However, in 1975, this whole area was reverted back to acreage, and we don't have a lot of documentation on why that took place. We just know that it did. So this is the rough configuration of what it looked like after that reversion to acreage, or the area that was reverted. And then in 2001, this 90-acre parcel was subdivided into approximately 5 large acreage parcels, ranging in size from 10 to 33 acres. And I'm going to use my mouse here on the screen if you want to look over there. This little piece here was not a part of the subdivision, so it's really those 4 other large lots that were created in 2001. In 2016, there was a lot line adjustment. If you look on the screen, there's a red dotted line that shows the original lot line configuration, and then the dark black line that squiggles through the property, that shows the current configuration as it was recorded after the lot line adjustment. And the purpose of that lot line adjustment was really to kind of more follow the road alignment. It's a driveway, the access driveway alignment, and to provide better access to buildable areas of the parcels. And that brings us to October of 2017, where the Planning Commission previously approved Resolution 2017-17. And that was to approve a tentative map to subdivide a 20-acre parcel into 3 7.5-acre parcels. And if you're doing the math there, that doesn't quite add up. So that includes a 2.5-acre lot line adjustment with a vacant parcel to the northwest that's under the same ownership. So 2.5 acres from that parcel would come down into this 20-acre parcel, and that creates the 3 7.5-acre parcels. The resolution also approved a use permit for hillside development on slopes that were greater than 20%. So that's a special use permit that's required within the town development code to really review the impacts of developing on steeper slopes. So the building envelopes are primarily in slopes of approximately 20%. And this is a depiction of the previously approved tentative map. I also want to point out, sorry for my squiggly red line here. I did my best, but it's hard to do it by hand with a mouse. So the red line shows the current lot line configuration of the lot line between that northwestern vacant parcel and the 3 proposed new lots. And then the solid black line, and again, I'm going to use my mouse, that comes along to the north side of the property, of the north side of the road, that encompasses that 2.5 acres that's proposed to be transferred to the south to provide adequate acreage in order to subdivide it into 3 parcels.
Just a quick note, I don't think we can see your mouse.
Oh, thanks for that clarification. Okay, well, do you have any suggestions on that?
There it goes.
Oh, hey, thanks for that. Okay, so the red squiggly line, that's the current lot line configuration. And then the dark black line to the north of that, to the north side of the road, that's the proposed lot line adjustment. The area between that is the 2.5 acres that would be transferred over in order to provide adequate acreage to subdivide into the 7.5 acre parcels. So just some additional background. After the Planning Commission approved the project, the applicant did submit preliminary improvement plans to the utility districts the following week after it was reviewed by Planning Commission. And then in May, they submitted their formal improvement plans to the town, and that's been under review. There have been a lot of other projects trying to get through to parcel map recordation or final map recordation. So that's still in the review process. And that brings us to the project request for tonight, which is a 1-year time extension to the previously approved tentative map to complete the necessary improvements and to prepare and record the lot line adjustment and the parcel map. And just as a reminder, this is noted in the staff report, but use permits do not expire as determined by the town attorney. So the hillside development section of that use permit, that is not under consideration tonight. You are just considering the 1-year time extension to the previously approved tentative map. Now, there's a lot of text on some of these slides because I want to include all of the findings in case you guys want to go back and have further discussion. But to summarize, there are 3 findings that the Planning Commission will need to make in order to approve the map. If you can't make one of those, then you cannot approve the map without adding conditions. So the first finding is that there have been no changes to the provisions of the general plan, specific plan, or development code since the project was previously approved in 2017. And to ensure the consistency of this project with the changes that have been made to the general plan development code, and there are no relevant specific plans, their 1-year time extension has a proposed condition to clarify the timeframes to record the parcel map. And sorry, let me step back 1 second. The resolution from the 2017 approval is still proposed to remain intact. And then we have a new resolution that proposes just to modify a few of the conditions. So the 2020 resolution proposes a few changes there. So one change is to clarify the timeframes to record the parcel map under this 1-year extension. Another change is within the resolution in 2017, it states the development code under which this project would need to demonstrate compliance. And since this is a new application for the time extension, it needs to comply with the current development code, and that would be the January 2019 code. And then we have the inclusionary housing. Since this project was approved, there have been several updates to the town council resolution regarding inclusionary housing and fees. The fee is now proposed to increase from approximately $13,000 up to $28,000. And I just want to explain a little bit. Back in 2017, the town council commissioned Bay Area Economics to revamp the calculations for inclusionary housing fees. And so they relooked at construction costs and supportable development costs and funding subsidies that might be available to developers. And so the cost of inclusionary housing fees went up significantly in 2017 to approximately $26,000. And then in 2018, it went up to approximately $28,000. And then it stayed the same this past year. So this project for the time extension was determined to be complete prior to the most recent adoption. So this project would be required to be compliant with the 2018 inclusionary housing ordinance. So if you have any questions on that, let me know. It's a little bit complicated. And then moving on to the second finding that the Planning Commission would need to make. You will need to find that there are no changes in the character of the site or the surrounding areas that affect the policies and how they would apply to the project. And there have been no modifications to this project site and very minimal changes to the surrounding residential neighborhood. Therefore, staff believes that the Planning Commission can make this finding. And the third and final finding that the Planning Commission would need to make is that there have been no changes to the capacity of community resources, so that there is no longer sufficient remaining capacity to serve the project. And this project was routed to all relevant utility districts and agencies, and no objections were filed. We believe that there's still adequate capacity. So the staff recommendation is to adopt Resolution 2020-01, determining the project to be exempt from CEQA and approving the one-year tentative map time extension based on the recommended findings and subject to the recommended conditions of approval. Alternative actions that the Planning Commission may consider are to approve this time extension subject to adding conditions of approval or modifying them, continuing the hearing to a date and time certain to request additional information or revisions to the time extension, require further CEQA environmental review, or to deny the time extension on the basis that one or more of the three findings for approval cannot be made. And that completes my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free. Otherwise, Martin with SEO doesn't have a formal presentation, but I think he'd like to say a few words here.
Okay, yeah.
Is this supposed to be turned this way, or can I?
I know.
Oh, you can adjust it.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's good.
Great. Well, good evening, Commissioners. Martin Wood with SCO Planning Engineering, and appreciate you hearing this one tonight. Thank you, Jamie, for the staff presentation. I think that clarifies a lot of the issues, but a couple points I just want to make. Our client, Ed Anderson, really from the week following the original approval has diligently tried to get this thing completed. And as with many of the projects in Truckee, as you well know, there's a lot of unique qualities that sometimes create delays. One of the aspects of this particular project was there's an existing water tank up on the hillside, and the location of the water tank is slightly below or kind of level with some of the building envelopes that are proposed or created. So we had to work kind of hand in hand with Neil Kaufman at TDPD Water to best design a system that PUD wanted to serve the parcels, but also had to work with the fire department to make sure that they were getting what they wanted to approve the project. So we kind of went back and forth on that issue. That was probably the biggest issue. But we have, basically have approval from all the utility agencies, and I think and Mike can maybe talk to it, but I know we're close with town engineering. We kind of made a choice at end of summer. We'd put it out to bid with multiple contractors, and as you know, the amount of construction that went on this summer, contractors didn't even want to bid this job in the summer. They were so busy that I think he got one bid in August, and they basically said they couldn't complete it this year. So actively getting bids right now. It looks like a much friendlier bidding environment. Wants to go to construction May or June if we have rain like we did last year, and wants to get the project buttoned up. So we made a choice. I guess we could have, even with improvement plans not being formally finalized through town engineering, we could have forced submitting a parcel map to try to get the MAP Act normal extension and bonded for improvements. But we felt a one-year extension with the efforts that our client has made a lot of sense to just get this thing wrapped up with the town and get it submitted and ready to approve. So with that, I'm available to answer any other more detailed questions, but that gives you some more of the history.
Great, thank you, Martin. And
Thank you.
if you don't mind sitting near the podium, should we have some questions? And with that, I'd like to open it up to public comment. If anyone has anything they would like to speak to the Planning Commission about with regards to this project, please step up to the podium, state your name, and you have 3 minutes. There's nobody's rushing up this evening. So with that, I'm going to close public comment in this portion of the public hearing, and we will move on to questions. We'll start with questions of staff, and then we'll move to questions of applicant. If there's some back and forth, that's okay, but ideally if we can try to structure it to focus on Jamie and then Martin, that would be great. Yeah, I would love that. Thank you, Susie.
Okay, I sent in a bunch of questions today, but I'm probably just going to go over them again because it was sort of an email exchange. But okay, so the general plan zoning designation is different from the zoning district. 1 dwelling unit per 10 acres and 1 dwelling unit per 7.5 acres. Why does the general plan not prevail in this case?
And I'll ask about this. So this is a map that shows the general plan land use designation for the area. The arrow points to the specific parcel in question. And so the general plan land use designations are intended by its very nature to be general. And you look at how the density is applied overall within that land use designation. So the red area of the map outlines the entire area that has the 1 dwelling unit per 10 acre designation. And then I'll scroll to the zoning map so you can see the difference. So this has that same boundary, but as you can see, there is a large portion of that property that is zoned for 1 dwelling unit per 20 acres. So it's at a more restrictive density. And then this section is zoned at 1 dwelling unit per 7.5 acres. So within that entire area, it should be at approximately that 1 dwelling unit per 10 acre general plan designation.
How did Armstrong get all those units in there? Or is this just change zoning over time?
Yeah, so the Armstrong Tract was approved long before
Okay.
the town was incorporated, yeah.
Okay. I'm still not sure why that is that way. Does it not seem like it's confusing on purpose?
It's helpful if you think of it in terms of, since the general plan is more comprehensive, that the land use designations are considered on that comprehensive level. And once you get down to the zoning, that's what implements on a parcel by parcel. So it's really talking about land use areas at the general plan level and parcels at the zoning level.
Okay, so moving on along the same theme. So during our general plan update discussions, it seems like a thread has been brought up that we're trying to eliminate sort of single-family residential zones to allow accessory dwelling units, and trying to sort of limit these big parcels. Is that just not applicable here because it's new and this is just an extension of something that's older?
I think what you're referencing is discussions that we're having as part of the update, so that wouldn't be applicable. ADUs in this current general plan, so the 2025 general plan, aren't counted towards density.
Oh.
So that's kind of an interesting nuance.
And the discussions, nothing's finalized with that, so that so then it's not.
Right, so there could be changes that happen at the land use designation level with the update, or those could stay the same and that we're still implementing through the zoning, the regulations that we want, just like we have now. So you can currently do an ADU in a single family and it's still a single family zone because we're not counting them towards density. So they're not reflected in that general plan land use designation. And the bigger parcel discussion is, in the future. Like, what do we want to see ourselves grow into in the future? And it's not more larger parcels beyond the policies that we've talked about for estate-sized parcels in this current general plan and development code.
Okay, and I think what I was misunderstanding is that on page 4, it was saying that the housing element has been updated. And so I didn't know if I'd missed a final draft that had happened recently, but this is a previous update.
Yes, so it has to be in compliance with whatever code was in effect at the time the application was deemed to be complete, which was in October, I believe, or maybe early November. So whichever housing element was adopted and in effect at that time, it locks it into that requirement. And so the changes since the project was approved in 2017 to the changes when the project was deemed complete for processing, the only updates to that were the land use element and the housing element, and none of the changes that were implemented affected the approvability of this project.
Great, thank you. So previously, we've not sort of had the conditions of approval reference previous conditions of approval. That's just because we're keeping that one as a regulation, and then this is an additional one on top?
Correct. And just to clarify, part of the reason for that is with a tentative map time extension, we're only reviewing the tentative map. We are not going back and reviewing the use permit. So if we had a whole new resolution, we couldn't be going back to approve the use permit. So this is really specific just to the tentative map conditions that have changed as a result of the new updates to codes in accordance with the findings.
So essentially, you won't see this happen very often. This is a very unique situation. On occasion, we will show it this way with the 2 resolutions.
Great, because I hadn't seen it in the last year, so it was surprising, just adapting. Moving on. I think that's all my questions for this one. Thank you.
Great. Jerusha?
I do not have any questions.
Okay. Dan?
Yeah, if the applicant was not able to complete this project in the next year, are they allowed to submit for another time extension?
That's correct. An applicant can request up to a total of 6 years of time extensions from the initial approval, with the only findings being required to be made are those 3 that we've outlined here. Otherwise, they have to come back and submit for a whole new map. So he could have, or the applicant could have requested a 6-year time extension. In this case, they requested just 1 year because they believe they can get the project done in that time.
I have a couple questions for staff. I'm confused. Has the lot line adjustment taken place, or it has not? And
it has not, because they didn't want to do the lot line adjustment if this map wasn't reapproved or the extension wasn't reapproved. So the lot line adjustment will get either recorded concurrent with the parcel map recordation, or it can also be recorded prior to the parcel map recordation, but it has to be done prior to or concurrent with the map.
Okay. And is that kind of typical?
It's a little unusual to have it done in this order, but we believe that it complies with the requirements of the development code and understanding the applicant's desire that if this map isn't reapproved, that they don't want to adjust the lot line.
Okay. And then under condition 2B, number 4, and I think this came up this evening, but in my review, I'm still confused about the date. It says January 11th, 2019. Shouldn't it be 2020? Or when did they submit this application? I'm just not clear on the dates. And is that correct? And am I confused?
So the date of the development code, that was the code that was in effect at the time that this time extension application was deemed complete for processing. So when an application is submitted to the Town of Truckee Planning Division, we take in the application, we review it, and we say, oh, you're missing these items, go back and fix that. They may resubmit, or it might be complete as is. So in this case, the application was deemed complete in, I believe it was November So it was subject to the January 2019 development code.
Okay,
So if the development code changes further, they're locked into that January 2019 development code.
Oh, okay.
Only
Unless
to
they-
record the map. Obviously,
yeah.
a building permit is going to be subject to those
Right.
requirements in effect at that time.
Okay. So they had a complete application November of 2019, so just a couple months ago. And at that time, the January 2019 development code was in place because we hadn't made amendments. At that
Correct.
point.
Yes, you guys
Okay.
adopted some other changes, but
Yeah.
that was after this
Okay.
was complete.
I appreciate the clarification. The dates were confusing to me and how it all lines up. And I have a couple more questions, and I'll ask you, Jamie, but they may be for Martin. Are there going to be two access points, or is it just the one access point at the end of, is it Sierra or Thomas, or at the upper left?
Yeah, the only current access point would be at the end of Palisade Street at the top left corner.
Okay.
And so it would wind through this property. It's possible that they could connect to a property to the north, which is zone public facility at this point. So it's unlikely, but it is possible that that could be considered by the Planning Commission in the future, but that's not anticipated at this time.
Okay, because there is a road I noticed coming off of, is it Sierra? The main road that runs kind of horizontally on our screen.
You're
Yeah.
talking about over here.
Yeah. Is that an access easement to the water tower? I drove, or I hiked up the road we're looking at on the screen to the water tower, but I couldn't get anywhere. And then I noticed on my way out there was another road down below.
Martin, I'll let you take this one.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm just wanting to get oriented on.
Water heads out of the tank south. There's a water line.
Yeah,
That kind of runs
okay.
down through there. And there's, I don't know when it happened, but at some point, one of the lots on that became part of it. And it's kind of a steep cut
Yes,
bank portion.
yeah.
So no, there won't be two accesses. The primary access will just be from the west.
Okay.
It's a driveway standard. A lot of the driveways already constructed that basically serves for the access for the water tank.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll be improved to have the necessary turnouts and the width to meet the development code and the fire department requirements.
And you can just stay up there because I have another question you could probably answer. Are they proposing to have a gate that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of a gate. The gate that's there now is the one that TDPUD basically has their TDPUD lock on it. And I think Ed Anderson, the owner, has a lock on there as well.
Yeah.
But that was a TDPUD installed gate.
Okay, are you aware if that might come down when this is developed?
That's a good question. We've never had that discussion. That was something that TDPUD had installed. Obviously, they don't want unnecessary people driving up to their tank site. So I think that's probably why they installed it. But we've never had that discussion.
Okay. Dan, it sounded like did you have any questions for Martin?
I was just curious what your goals are for this year. Are you just trying to put the road in and develop the building sites?
Yeah, we want to do the necessary improvements that are required to record the map. And really, the owner's goal is he wants to build his own house up there. And it has to construct the road and get the utilities in order to do that. So it'll be all underground utilities, sewer, water, and dry utilities.
That was my only question.
Yeah.
Jerusha, did you have any questions? Susie?
I have a subject just for discussion later. I think I'm all set with questions, though. Thank you.
Great. And if there's no more questions for Martin, I'll ask him to be seated, and we could move to deliberations unless anyone has any more questions for staff. You guys ready for deliberations? So just to kind of frame our conversation this evening, Jamie mentioned the findings that we need to make with regards to the general plan and the development code. The specific plan doesn't apply because there is not one, but there were 4 findings with regards to general plan, the time frame, the development code, inclusionary housing, no changes in the character of the site regarding those policies, or changes in capacity of our community resources. So it'd be great if we could frame our conversation around that, but of course we can talk about anything. I guess I'm curious, one of my notes was, Jerusha, I believe you were at the table for this conversation in 2017, and I was curious, since we didn't have minutes from that hearing, if you recall anything substantial or guiding topics from that conversation, or if it was just fairly straightforward and a clear deliberation.
I think there was a little bit of discussion on the emergency access, only having one point, but in general, I don't recall extensive deliberation on much.
Great. Okay, Susie, do you want to start?
Yeah, and to frame it in terms of the findings, finding two, we have to find that there's no changes to the site that would change. And now, so I just get to wondering, like, how bad does a drought have to be? How bad does fire danger have to be in order for it to be considered changes to the site? When do we take that into consideration? And this is pushing into that wildland urban interface. Again, sort of another topic of discussion at our general plan. So that's my question, just for discussion amongst us.
Do you want to speak?
I sort of think that possibly improving that road will help with, fighting wildland fire and better access to that water tank and that sort of thing. So, I get that it's bringing increased uses to the site, but that's not really under our review tonight, the conditions. But you're talking about the findings? Yeah. In terms of the findings?
Yeah, and that was finding number 2, that there's no changes to the site. So that was sort of where it came into me.
Right.
Dan, do you have any thoughts or any that you'd like to share on this topic?
I mean, I would agree with Jerusha that it sounds like if that road's improved, it's going to provide better access to that hillside if there was a fire back there.
Yeah. I tend to agree with Jerusha on that. I thought about that as well. I do believe we have policies, and Danielle, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't have the general plan in front of me, but I know there are policies that were created in the last general plan about discouraging estate-sized parcels. That being said, the zoning of this does account for it, and I think that there are limitations with how much more subdividing can be done in that region. And I kind of understand how, there's that whole area to the west that is not really developable, the hillside above the highway to the west of Armstrong. So I think it kind of, that's where that averaging comes from in terms of the density. Oh, thank you. And then the public facilities, I don't know what the zone, I don't think that accounts, you're allowed much, if any, development in those zoning districts. So, I do think there are limitations on how much can be done in that area. So I feel comfortable making the findings for that, for number 2. I feel like it was approved under the same standards that we're talking about tonight. Do you guys want to talk about anything else? The changes in capacity of our resources. I don't have a problem. I think we're fine in that regard. Dan? Yep. And then the first one, there was Jamie, maybe you could bring up the slide about the time frames. Yeah. Clarifying the time frames to record the parcel map. It seems fairly straightforward. And the development code compliance date, got clarification on that because I was confused. And then the inclusionary housing, that made sense to me. So we did have, well, I guess the town council voted recently, but that probably was out of the
Correct, yeah. The
timeframe.
2019
Yeah.
resolution was adopted shortly after this application was deemed complete.
Okay.
But the amount is the same.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I wasn't aware if there was a change. So that seems fairly clear and straightforward. Do you guys have any more thoughts?
I don't have any additional comments.
I guess just my question for thought is that this does seem like the type of thing that we are trying to move away from, estate-sized parcels that are in the wildland interface. And what do we need to change in our town guidelines to make it so that going forward into the future, that's not there? So I just want us to all keep that in mind and help keep our eye on the prize moving forward.
And that would come down to a zoning change, is that correct? As we go through this general plan update process, it could be a general plan zoning change or land use?
So in the general plan
designation?
update, you would typically look at your land use designations and changing those, and then you could potentially have a future action where you talk about changing specific zoning on parcels also.
Yeah. Well, now's the time. I mean, this is all important food for thought, and there's a lot of relevancy and things up. Really, this is the time to be having the conversations with regards to creating new policies and changing our documents.
Right, and thank you.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll get everyone involved in doing that. Yeah, I think that's it.
Do you have anything else? Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 2020-01, approving the one-year tentative map time extension and determining the time extension to be exempt from CEQA pursuant to Section 15061B3, based on the recommended findings and subject to the conditions.
A second.
Great. May we have a roll call, Emily?
Commissioner Tarnay,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Chair Riley,
Yes.
and Commissioner Freeman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martin. Do I need to read anything, or are we've adopted Resolution 2020-01? Great. Okay. We will move on now to our major review section of the agenda this evening, Section 8, Public Hearings, Item 8.1, and this is application number 2019-6032, DPUPTM, I think Development Permit, Use Permit, Tentative Map. And we will pass the mic to Laura.
All right, good evening, Commissioners. The project that we're going to be talking about next is located on Palisades Drive. Sorry, it's a little faded on the screen there, but you can see Brockway Road and then Palisades coming off of it. Behind these parcels are the Stonewood condominiums. I included a zoning map and general plan land use map, just for some additional context. You can see that on the zoning map here, the parcels are in dark brown, and then those are included in the general plan designation here that covers a large part of the Sierra Meadows subdivision. So that's sort of similar to what Jamie was saying in the last presentation about the difference between the zoning versus the general plan designation. This project is a 9-unit multifamily residential project. There are 2 existing parcels. They're zoned RM10, which is multifamily residential, 10 dwelling units per acre. They're proposing 6 duplex units that each have a 2-car garage and 3 triplex units that have 1-car garages and then a surface parking space for each of those units, in addition to the guest parking. The average living area is just under 1,500 square feet per unit, and the project proposes to subdivide the site into individual ownership parcels for each of those 9 units, plus a common area parcel. So this project would require a development permit due to the amount of site disturbance, use permit for development that is on slopes of 20% or greater, and the tentative map to accomplish the subdivision. So there's our project site. You can see the 2 parcels. The project area is just under an acre. It has existing vegetation. There's trees and brush. And the applicant team estimates that the slopes range from 8 to 26%. So I included the site plan. You can see on the left here the proposed parcels that would be created for the individual ownership, and the diagram on the right shows the actual building footprints. So we can refer back to that if you have questions about the site design. And I also included the floor plans, which we can also refer back to. These are the elevations for the duplex units, and then the floor plans and elevations for the triplex units. I included this as a comparison. What we have up top are the designs that you saw on the previous slide, and then the applicant team actually sent me some updated elevations this afternoon, which I included for your consideration. Mostly that's to address this garage here on the far left side. They changed the roof pitch of that based on some questions we had from one of the commissioners about that mass. So if you're comfortable with making that change, that's one modification that you could consider as part of this approval. And then this is the rendering that was included in your staff report, so you can see the mass if that roof pitch isn't changed and how that would potentially look on the triplex. I had a question about some of the exterior lighting fixtures that were proposed. So what we have here are a few different fixtures that were included in the staff report, and then some additional fixtures that the applicant team suggested as possible alternatives. The questions were mostly related to whether the fixtures were compliant with the exterior lighting guidelines, which require them to be fully shielded. So it appears that these 2 fixtures on the left, that the bulb is fully shielded by the fixture, so those appear to comply with our requirements. These ones here, if they're recessed, then those potentially could also comply. That's something that we always look at through the building permit to make sure that whatever fixtures are proposed do comply with all of our requirements. So there's a condition that requires all of the exterior lighting to be downshielded and comply with the town requirements. So if you're comfortable with that, ensuring that all of the fixtures will be compliant, then no changes would need to be made. If you think that some of these alternate fixtures would be a better option, then we could definitely talk about that. So the development permit is required. For the number of units, this would actually typically be just a zoning clearance, but because of the amount of site disturbance, that requires the development permit, the use permit for the slope disturbance, and the tentative map. In terms of the general plan consistency, the land use designation is 1 to 2 dwelling units per acre. There's policies about the visual character, design quality, and after reviewing the application, we feel that this would create some new infill development. It's in an existing residential neighborhood, and we think that that meets those general plan goals. I put together this just to quickly show the different development standards, what's required and proposed. This was included in the staff report as well, just to show that in terms of the setbacks, site coverage, height, standards like that, parking, it's consistent with all of those requirements. The development code also looks at site and building design, and I included the sort of breakdown of the different units, so we can refer back to that if you have questions about different sizes. And these are the materials that the applicant team is proposing. Hillside development is one area that you'll need to consider tonight. The use permit is required in order to disturb slopes over 20%. As you can see from the slope diagram that the applicant team put together, the area in green here in the middle is where the steeper slopes are on the site. So it would be pretty challenging to design a project that would avoid those completely. The development code has design criteria that's required if you're going to be constructing on a hillside. So it's really to follow the natural contours and avoid mass grading, things like that. So those slopes in the middle, this you can kind of see an overview of the area in terms of the topography. The steeper slopes would be, in the middle of the site there, as you can see. We do have some conditions that we recommended that address grading and protecting that from erosion. And site access is proposed off of Palisades here on the curve, and we did receive a public comment that raised some concerns about the location of that access. The engineering division actually required the applicant to put together this site distance exhibit to address possible concerns with what that visibility would look like when you're pulling in and out of this development. And based on their review of that, they were comfortable that there would be sufficient site distance to not create a hazard. So what their recommendation was through the improvement plans to look at if there's vegetation that needs to be cut back or trees removed to improve the site distance even more, then they'll look at that through the improvement plan process. And snow storage and tree preservation are another two topics that were addressed in the staff report. The 50% requirement applies to this project for snow storage. You can see in the blue the areas that they're proposing to use for that. And then tree preservation, there's 43 trees that are proposed to be removed. There are a lot of trees on this site. We included some conditions that require the final snow storage plan to be approved by the town engineer and a tree protection plan to ensure that the trees that are proposed to remain will be protected during construction and that no trees outside the disturbance area can be removed. I will note that the labels on the tree preservation plan were flip-flopped, so you may have noticed in your staff report that it showed that the ones with the black X were being retained, but it's actually the opposite. The green are the ones that are being retained and the black X's are being removed. So next is the inclusionary housing. The applicant's proposing to construct one inclusionary unit. As part of the 15% requirement, that would come up to 1.35 units with 9 units. So they propose to construct the one unit and then pay a inclusionary housing fee for the fractional unit, which is allowed. So condition number 30 would require payment of that fee, and whatever fee is currently in effect when they are ready to have their building permit issued. There's also requirements in the code for maximum allowed living area for the average living area of the units. We recommended a condition that would put a deed restriction on the units and then also a note on the map that would let future owners know that they're limited to that average 1,500 square feet. In terms of environmental review, we used the standard exemption, which applies to projects that have no potential for significant impacts. After we did the noticing, at the time, there was discussion about whether a planned development would be part of this project to allow for tandem parking, and the applicant team ended up redesigning the parking in front of the triplex unit so that that's not necessary. So you could choose to go with the section 15332, which is the infill development. We think that that's probably a more appropriate exemption to use for this particular project. A few modifications to the resolution that are recommended. I noticed that condition 56 cut off part of the sentence, so one recommendation is just to add this language in blue to complete that sentence. Second recommendation would be to use the infill exemption for CEQA. And then also, if you're comfortable with the modified elevations with that different roof pitch, then we would just clarify in condition of approval number 1 that the revised elevations are what's approved. We received 2 public comments on the project. The first was related to wildfire, and then the second was from an adjacent property owner who had concerns about the access point onto Palisades in relation to potential safety issues. Those are both included in your staff report. So our recommendation would be to adopt Resolution 2020-02, approving the development permit, use permit, and tentative map as amended, and determining the project exempt from CEQA per section 15332 of the CEQA guidelines. You could also choose to continue the hearing, add, delete, or modify the permits, deny the project if you feel that the findings can't be made, or require additional environmental review. If you take action tonight, your approval will have an appeal period that ends at 5 p.m. on January 31st. And I'm happy to take any questions. We have our agent and architect here. They're not going to give a formal presentation, but if you have any questions, they're happy to answer those.
Great, thank you, Laura. I'm going to move ahead now with public comment, if you guys are okay with that. And we'll do questions after. So I'd like to open this portion of the hearing to public comment. If you'd like to make public comment, you can come up to the podium and state your name, and you have 3 minutes. So I'm not seeing any activity, so I'm going to close public comment and move on to questions. Dan, would you like to start? Do you have any questions for staff?
Sure. I noticed it sounds like there's a survey discrepancy between what the plot maps show and what the applicant surveyor came back with. Is that common?
Yeah, the assessor's parcel maps aren't always accurate, so we typically defer to a licensed surveyor if they go out, find the monuments, locate the property lines, do the research, and we defer to their professional judgment on the actual parcel size.
So it'd be safe to assume that that is a more accurate survey.
Correct.
Regarding the snow storage, how do they actually get the snow down there below the buildings?
Let me go back to that. There we go. Sorry. So I did talk about this with engineering. After reviewing this, they think that how it would work is that either the snow could be pushed back here. I assume that this is what you're talking about, is this area here at the back.
Yeah.
Or potentially it could be blown back there with a blower. And I think that... On the right screen. Sorry. Oh, there we go. So the agent could give you more information on how they anticipate that snow removal to work if you have more questions about that.
But that's an adequate design for engineering.
Yeah, engineering was comfortable with that.
Okay.
The final snow storage plan would have to be approved by the town engineer before the building permits are issued. So that's something that they would have another chance to look at if they have any concerns.
Okay.
So I assume you're talking about the area that's kind of to the north of the site?
Correct.
And it feels like there's pretty good access from the fire turnaround to get to that area, to blow snow in that area, if they choose to use blowers. Or if the applicant wants to talk about snow removal at all. But I think they, with a combination of using, pushing snow to those areas or using a blower to get them, to get it further down the hill. It is a downsloping site, so the snow will go down over that hill pretty well.
Mm-hmm. That's it for now.
Okay, great. Jerusha?
Thanks. Mike, I was curious on the site distance agreement or exhibit that they prepared. Do you feel like that's the best site access, or, because it almost feels like something maybe further to the west would be better, where it's flatter and it's straighter? I'm just kind of curious about your input on that.
Yeah, there's existing 2 parcels. So if each one of these was designed by themselves, there's a possibility of having 2 access points off Palisades. So you kind of try to look at the site overall for access to both, to give an access that would serve development on both parcels, as well as trying to line it up is close to across from the existing driveway for timbers. So I don't know if in the staff report, does it show? Yeah, I think it
Yeah, it does
shows
show
pretty
that.
well that these driveways
Line
align with each other for, movements coming in and out of both those driveways to be able to see each other. And then also the location of it allowed for the sight distance to the west and to the east within that parcel area where they kind of have control to clear those sight lines for vegetation and trees and other things. And in addition, there's going to be a sidewalk added to the frontage, which will help, particularly in the wintertime, having a little additional room there that's cleared for sight distance.
Great, thank you. And then looking at this plan, are there going to be BMPs for all that snow storage? It looks like there's something in place, like retention, something.
Yeah, correct. There's a couple retention basins near the bottom, some ponds, but I don't know if you notice on the drainage plan, they've tried to treat the different areas closest to the sources they can. Instead of having just the original design had just bigger ponds at the bottom, and everything got piped to those. But instead, now to the south side of the units, they're treating some of that water, and then some of the other duplexes are treating closer to each duplex, so that those ponds can be slightly smaller down at that lower end. But they will have to take into account snow storage if they're using it for both snow storage and retention treatment.
Okay.
So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but
No, you are.
there's several places throughout the site where they're trying to treat the water and get it back to sheet flow.
Right.
And then in this lower part, there's a couple places where they are catching it at the bottom.
And everything will be sized accordingly for the right storm and
For the storm as well as snow storage.
okay. That's it for now.
Susie?
Okay, so the exemption that we're asked to find on this, exemption 15061 from CEQA, states that the activity is covered by the common sense exemption that CEQA applies only to projects which have the potential for causing a significant effect on the environment, where it can be seen with certainty that there is no possibility that this activity in question may have a significant effect on the environment. The activity is not subject to CEQA. I'm just, I don't know if I have the experience to say that I can see with certainty that there is no possibility of significant effect. Do we have other projects that are this size that have been built on 20% slopes that have had CEQA studies? I mean, am I asking does that make sense? How I can't say with certainty that there's no environmental effect.
So there's 2 additional fourplexes that are located to the west of these that both had exemptions that were built on the same slope as this project. I think with the one next door, the Palisades one, we used the infill exemption for that one, but the other ones used the general exemption. So those are just a couple examples.
Well, I'm asking if you're using an exemption by saying that you're certain that there's no possibility of significant effect, but I'm asking, has there been anything where the environmental study was done where it was shown that there was no? Do you understand what I'm asking? No?
I do.
Thank you. Jenna, you look like you had something to say.
Sure. So I think some of the, excuse me, important distinction here is that exemption applies to a significant impact. So it's not saying that there may not be environmental impacts associated. However, they don't rise to the level of significance that warrant mitigation, either through an EIR or a mitigated negative declaration. So you would be making a determination that none of the impacts rise to trigger a threshold of significance that the town might have for an impact. I apologize if that's a lot of CEQA-ese right there, but it really isn't saying that there isn't an impact. It's not that it's a significant impact.
Okay, it's not CEQA-ese, it's just vague terminology, significant effect, and I don't know where the threshold of that is.
So the threshold are determined through the town, either in the development code or the general plan. And when we determine appropriateness of an exemption, we run through the CEQA checklist and looking at all the different impact areas. And in this determination, we've not found any impacts associated with the project that would trigger that level of environmental review that would warrant mitigation. Does that make sense?
And I think to kind of go off of what Danielle was saying with regards to the existing development, which I think maybe is not exactly what your question is, but I know when I went to the site and I thought to myself, oh, there have been these developments that are there now, similar in design and approach, and location, and haven't generated a significant environmental impact that we're aware of, and they've all been there, some of them many years. The adjacent ones have essentially been built for enough time that I think we would be aware, at least at the planning level. And so that's kind of what I'm going off of. And I think, just to kind of reiterate what Jenna was saying, like that we would be aware of a significant effect. They would know, okay, we can't just write this off or say, yeah, it's all good, because we think, given what's been done in the past, it could cause something greater in terms of an environmental impact. So that's kind of what I'm going off of. I do see the benefit that this is infill, existing neighborhood, similar type of development, similar approach. I think that's more the direction I would go in, but obviously that we can talk about that later.
And that does make sense. So as a town, we have not received any complaints of excess erosion or sedimentation coming down from those adjacent properties to the ones downslope of them. Is that correct?
No, we haven't.
Thank you. That actually does help a lot. Thank you. Give me a sec. Okay, I did have some confusion about the inclusionary housing ordinance. I thought it was by unit instead of by that percentage. And so I thought this was 2 units above the 7, and therefore you pay a little bit less. But so it goes by, it's the 0.35% above. I think that's what you're saying.
So I think the table that you were looking at when you asked the question earlier was for the 1 to 6 new units that are created. So beyond that, in this case 9 units, the 15% would apply. So when that comes out to 1.35, the developer has the option for the fractional unit of paying the in lieu fee.
So a quick question then, if somebody is just building 7 units, they're then responsible, because that comes out to 1.05 units, they're responsible for that 0.05 of the in lieu housing fee?
Right.
Cool, I just hadn't heard that before, thank you. Oops, lost my site, there we go. Can I ask, do we know who owns the parcel to the northeast where our snow storage is up against?
The parcel here, you mean?
Yes.
Stonewood at Truckee?
But in between there, I went out and walked the site, and there's a pretty significant drainage ditch down there that the engineer that I walked the site with was comfortable with that catching any water that might end up coming down the hillside so that it wouldn't impact that neighborhood. She said it was really well designed for future development up the hill to account for that.
Okay, and that, but is there a possibility of that parcel being designed and losing that drainage ditch?
Let me go back to the...
I'm pretty sure we're talking about the Stonewood HOA-owned property.
Would it be the one here?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's open space for the Stonewood condos.
Okay, so that is not a separately owned, Stonewood will not put another duplex on there?
No, I mean, that's property that's commonly held by their HOA. So when we did the density for Stonewood, we looked at all of that. So they don't have more development potential left unless we change the zoning.
Excellent. Was that in the staff report somewhere? Because I did not see that.
No.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's for them. Is there along with the new sidewalk that's coming? So I have to say, I live in Sierra Meadows and I go past this all the time. I'm not within 500 feet though, but I ride my bike up this hill often. Is there a plan for clearing that sidewalk? Is that part of the sidewalk development?
Yeah, we talked about that for this project to have the snow removal as part of the maintenance agreement.
Okay, and then that is up.
It's going to be a sidewalk along the frontage.
Right.
And partially that's because of this site distance issue too, to keep that open in the winter, but also to keep it open for use on the side of the road. Is that your question about snow removal?
Yeah. And that's their responsibility, or is there an enforcement method of that, or what happens?
Yeah, we're going to have it in the maintenance agreement for the frontage improvements. That the HOA will have to maintain that.
So it's similar to agreements that we have downtown where if they fail to do it for whatever reason, then it gives our code compliance officer an opportunity to have a conversation with them about removing the snow.
That doesn't mean the town removes it and then charges them or something. It's just
Not typically. It's usually a conversation, and a lot of times it's either lack of awareness or they've changed their removal contractor. So we've rarely had a problem beyond a conversation.
You said you've rarely or really?
Rarely. Yeah,
Okay.
it doesn't happen very often
Okay.
because we have something in writing. It's very tangible for someone to see that this is what we all agreed to.
Great, excellent. Looking forward to a sidewalk there. I agree with the snow storage, so I'm still a little bit confused about that. The snow storage looks like there's a, that truck turnaround stops at a curb, and then there's a 6-foot retaining wall, a small terrace, and another 6-foot retaining wall down from there, correct? It sounds dangerous for pedestrians. It sounds...
Yeah, so it's a downslope, and the retaining wall, I talked a little bit with the applicant about this. I mean, this is not the final design, but this is something we can look into. But you have the fire turnaround. They wanted to keep that up higher so the slope wasn't so steep there to make a turnaround for the fire. And then what that causes is at your fill, you have some retaining walls for that slope down towards the retention pond. It's possible that we may be able to do some work with the slope work without retaining walls, or for snow removal, it may be difficult to push snow across that, but certainly a blower would still be able to blow snow down to that area. I don't know if I'm answering your question. I mean, they could use a combination of plow blade to get to some of these areas, and also a blower to potentially, blow snow further away after they clear it. I could have you maybe talk to the applicant a little bit about design. I don't know if this is a final design. We're still looking at, when the improvement plans come in, those are some of the issues that you raised about the curb and potentially the retaining walls, that we could look at maybe another design if Rob would like to discuss it.
Oh, should we do it later, or do we? I'll hold that for.
We'll have more questions for you. We'll
Okay.
then avoid the back and forth, ideally.
Sorry.
And I think, Laura, you tried to send me a map with all of the retaining walls circled, and it didn't come through in my computer. The circles came through as a separate graphic, unfortunately, not on the map. So it's just those two by the fire turnaround, and then there's others on the south side to protect sort of their back patio. Is that the only retaining walls?
Right.
Okay. And they are max 6 feet high?
Yeah, that's what's called out on the site plan. There's some that are called out as being 5.5 feet maximum, but 6 would be the highest.
And again, that retaining wall is downsloping. It's to hold the slope up. It's not a retaining wall that's sticking up above the grade. It's actually below the grade to hold the slope. And they're terracing with 2 retaining walls rather than having a bigger wall. But there is a potential they could move the wall back further and then have a higher wall, but it'd be further away from the turnaround and everything, So I'm not sure if that answers your question, or could have multiple shorter walls to terrace down the slope as well. So
My question about the double retaining walls there at the turnaround was that it's a 7% down slope and then 2 retaining. If someone gets sliding down there, are they going to go off 2 6-foot retaining walls?
I think there could be a buffer between the turnaround and the retaining wall, or they could actually have a curb or something there. Or if they wanted, they could have the retaining wall be a little bit higher to provide a little bit of a buffer. That might hinder some plowing if you were going to use a blade, but it won't hinder it if you were going to use a blower.
Okay, I'm going to move off of retaining walls now. Is there any way to save any of these mature trees on this property? Oh, I guess I'll come back. That's for you guys, not for these guys. Okay, and so similarly to the other property, they would be able to do junior ADUs inside here, correct?
So the new state
Danielle's nodding.
legislation allows for some ADUs as part of a multifamily project. So you can have the 2 detached ADUs. I'm not sure how those would be able to be squeezed into the site because it's pretty constrained. But that is allowed under the state requirements. And then they also included language that allows you to convert non-habitable space in a multifamily project. So like a boiler room. Again, I don't know how that would really be applied in this type of situation, but theoretically you could add secondary residential units to a multifamily project if it met the state requirements.
And I mean, non-habitable spaces, does that include a garage? Like if they decided later to take one of their garage spaces and make it into a tiny, that's legally allowed by the state, correct?
They were very specific in how they wrote that language, and it was boiler rooms and crawl spaces, and it didn't include garages in that particular allowance. So I would not think that a garage would fall under that for a multifamily project.
Great, thank you.
I'm a little confused on that. I thought these couldn't be larger than 1,500 square feet.
Yeah, so we would.
Oh, it would be
a new unit,
Okay,
essentially.
okay.
So our we've never had to deal with this since this legislation just went into effect a couple weeks ago. But we imagine that if something like that were to come in, we would look at those as additional units, and as long as they also met the 1,500 square foot limitation, then they would be allowed.
Sorry, I'm seeing if I have any more staff questions in here really quickly. Do you want to go ahead, Nikki, and I'll...
Yeah, sure. I have a few questions. The first one, are these units going to be for sale or for rent? And are you clear on the inclusionary unit, whether that's for sale or for rent, and what rate that would be at in terms of low, moderate, et cetera?
Rob could probably speak to what their plans are.
Okay, I'll save that for Rob. And then, let's see, I had more questions about the earth retention, so maybe, Michael, you can help me with that. It kind of seems like the landscape plan might be the most clear, perhaps, in showing where retaining walls are proposed. Because my sense is, I visited the site and then looking at the slope map, that central area where the entry and the pavement will be and the access is kind of the steeper part. And so there would likely be, a clearing, and then they would be retaining earth both to the south and the north in some fashion. And so I just wanted to kind of discuss what that looks like. I have a sense of what you were describing to Susie on that north end with the terracing, but I'm not clear on maybe what's happening at the southern portion of the site.
Okay. Let me try to, and then Rob can correct me if I'm saying anything wrong when it's his turn, but I think what they're trying to kind of do is balance the site a bit. So the access the site right now is steep coming off the edge of the road. And you're right, the main driveway isn't part of the steepest part of the site. What they're trying to do is have the access point be kind of a balance point for the grading. So making a better approach to the road so that it's not steep coming onto the road, and then you have, as good a sight distance as you can possibly. And then keeping the drive aisles and the, turnarounds and stuff at reasonable slopes.
Yeah.
And then to the south, those units are kind of, cut in to the slope, but then the units to the north are in fill. So you basically keep your access so it's the most reasonable to the garages and the turnaround and the backing out and stuff for both the upsloping lots to the south as well as the downsloping lots to the north, and then building your buildings up from that. So what that does is it means there's some areas in between the buildings you have to retain with walls and other things to keep your access. They basically took the steepest part of the slope and used that as their access.
That's what I,
and then cut into the one side and then filled on the other side.
So I'm wondering, and I think a section would have been really helpful. The units and the driveways to the north would appeared that they would be need to be retained. Maybe the whole perimeter. And maybe Rob, maybe I should have you walk through this or just kind of outline it, because I know I just want to better understand what it's going to look like.
Yeah, your access to the garages is at one slope, but then the building from itself may go down from there.
Yeah.
The foundation may be lower.
And it seems like the pavement would be, want to be at one level, but then the earth is going to slip away, moving south, north.
Yeah.
Creating a need for retention. I had one more question before I could move to you and help us out some more. The sidewalk, is this going to connect to any other sidewalks, or is this the sidewalk to nowhere?
No, it's going to connect. So Stonewood has a sidewalk that's adjacent to the road. It's a curb gutter and then an adjacent sidewalk. I believe that was a 4-foot wide sidewalk. And then there was a gap at this lot, and then the next lot to further up that's just been developed is going to do actually a detached sidewalk. They had the choice of a attached or detached, and they're going to do the detached one, but it'll just be slightly off the road. And so with this project, it's going to connect the sidewalk from Stonewood to the connection at the next lot up. We'll get you all the way to Torrey Pine.
Okay.
So basically, the next lot to the west will have a frontage improvement also.
Is there a overall plan? I mean, I don't remember if there is, or to have sidewalks throughout Sierra Meadows, or
that's basically on the other side of the road. Timbers, has the trail. Yeah. And it gets all the way to Torrey Pine.
Okay.
And then this sidewalk on this side, there will be a slight gap down by, Brockway Road up to Stonewood, but then Stonewood to Torrey Pine will have a sidewalk along the north side as well.
Okay.
And there was some previous multifamily that was done between Torrey Pine and Ponderosa that don't have sidewalk, but any of these newer ones that have been developed are having the frontage improvement requirement.
Okay. Thank you for that update. I will move us on to applicant questions, unless you guys have any more questions for staff. Okay. Dan, did you have any questions for the applicant? And Rob, would you mind, thank you, stepping up to the podium?
Rob, how is trash handled?
There's trash enclosures, individual trash enclosures at each unit. So we're not going to have dumpsters. They'll be individual.
And then is there mail delivery on site?
We don't show mail delivery on site, but I think the plan is to put one structure for all the units.
Okay. I'm still scratching my head on the snow storage and what those retaining walls are going to look like, being a builder and having a 14-foot
Sure.
drop from where that driveway is and how you actually get the snow out there?
Yeah, I'll explain a little bit. It's definitely a challenging site, and so the goal was to keep the turnaround as moderate as possible. We didn't want to go over 8%. We actually put it at about 6.9% for the turnaround. And so at the end, the grade, because of the existing grade, we can only make up so much grade with 6.9%. We're about 10 or 11 feet in the air at the end of there. So to prevent anybody from going off the edge, we'll have a curb around that turnaround, and then we'll have the retaining wall. And rather than have one retaining wall of 10 or 11 feet, we thought it would be a lot nicer to break it up into 2 6-foot retaining walls. It keeps it moderate. We could put some landscaping in between. I've talked with engineering and Mike about this, and there's ways that we could push that first retaining wall out a little bit so that you'll have a gap, kind of a flat shoulder area between the curb and the wall. The wall could also be raised up a foot, so there's not going to be any possibility of a car sliding down there, going over the curb, and then down 6 or 12 feet. We'll make sure that it's safe. So I think we can just do minor revisions to that wall and make it a real safe situation. The goal on the snow storage was always to blow it at that location, because we're not going to be able to plow down those walls, but they may plow the road into that turnaround and then blow it down. And it's actually a really good location for snow storage. We show lots of little areas for snow storage to get the 50% per the code, but the code also allows that if you have a large area that can be stacked a little bit higher than normal, which that area would fit into that criteria, that you could have less of a snow storage area. So we'll tweak the snow storage a little bit, make sure that it works with our drainage, and make sure that we design the walls to make sure it's safe. But that's how it works.
Okay, it sounds like you guys have thought through it.
Yes, we've thought through it very extensively.
Since you're talking about retention, would you mind kind of walking through where the areas of significant retention or maybe engineered, like a wall versus just 2-to-1 slope? Just through, basically, I can understand where you're describing the turnaround, but I'm wondering, is there also going to be a wall retention at the driveways for those units to the north? And then the entry to the driveway, or maybe you could just point out kind of areas of.
So I'll go over through a little bit of the design, starting with the drainage. The drainage, originally we had 2 large areas of retention on the drainage, and in discussing with engineering, it was preferable to treat the drainage closest to the source. So we actually have 6 areas of treatment of drainage now, so that those ponds down at the bottom are much smaller. So that's how we dealt with the drainage. As a last resort, we would do underground infiltrators, but we have plenty of capacity, and this is the preference to do it this way. So secondly, Mike explained it pretty well, actually, of how we thought of the design. We wanted to, let me back up just a second and just really briefly discuss the history, because it might help to know kind of how this all evolved. That originally there was 3 parcels that were going to be developed all concurrently. And for economic reasons, the developer only developed 1 parcel at a time at the very, to the west of this project. She developed a 4-plex. And the reason being just economics, couldn't take it off as one chunk. So the money lender, which is our client, the developer lost the rest of the project, and so the money lender picked it up, and he's not a developer, and so his original idea was, let's just sell these off individually and develop individually. But I think the thought process for us in talking him into it was, it's a much better design to develop it as a whole, so that we have 1 access off of Palisades. We don't need 2. It was really tricky to get another entrance off of Palisades and egress further up to the west. So that's a little bit of the history of how it came about being 2 parcels together, because originally it was going to be 3. So as Mike mentioned, where we put the egress off of Palisades, that's actually a flat area that's almost directly across from the access across, and engineering always likes them to line up. You don't want them offset by 50 or 100 feet, because then it creates a conflict. We're coming off the Palisades only at about 4%, so that's going to really help with sight distance. You're not going to be dropping down the hill or coming up trying to look, on a steep slope. It's only going to be 4%, basically flat. So by starting there and not on the high side, we avoided having a project that was all fill, and by avoiding coming in on the very low side, we avoided having a project that was all in cut. So we were able to balance the site pretty well. So everything to the south is going to be in cut. You're going to have the largest cuts, obviously, in the back at the patios. We tried to keep everything 6 foot or less. And then on the north side, you're going to take that dirt from the cut side, put it in where the garage areas are. So you're going to have a little bit of fill on the driveways and under the garage pad. You have a retaining wall behind the garage. And then the architect, who's also here tonight, worked really well with the terrain to step the units down the hill so that we could work with the terrain as best as possible. So we really don't have that much fill after the garage. You'll have some fill in the northern driveways and garage slab, and then the units step down the hill really nicely so that we avoid having any import, and we can balance the site.
So I appreciate all of that update and kind of history. The driveways that you've described on the north part, where you talk about the like a retaining wall at the driveway, or at the garage, are the driveways themselves going to need a retention? Because will those be on fill?
Just slight fill, and some of them are real close to grade, so no, we won't need any.
Not a wall on
no
either
walls along the
side.
driveways, no.
I just wasn't clear, but great. I feel good, and I have more questions, but in the interest of order, yeah, okay. So I have a couple more questions. One was, are these units planned to be for sale or for rent?
The plan now is to make them for sale. He's going to subdivide them into 9 lots, and they'll be for sale units.
Okay.
Obviously, if he builds them and they don't sell, then he'll probably quickly want to rent them.
And then the inclusionary unit, that would be for sale as well I guess it has to be.
It'll be deed restricted and at a certain income level, yes.
Great. I just get on my soapbox. Thank you, and thanks to the developer for doing that and not trying to get out of this requirement. And I really appreciate you guys being part of the solution to workforce housing in this community, and not just paying the fee or deferring to another time. So
yeah,
I
absolutely.
appreciate that a lot.
It's not always
great.
easy convincing developers to build the units, because it's a lot costlier to build these units than to pay the fee.
Yeah, absolutely.
And which brings up one point I just want to ask. It might be part of the discussion with staff and the commission. Just so we're clear, obviously want to build the inclusionary unit and then pay the additional in lieu fee for the remaining. I just want to, my understanding was different on the calculations, so I just want to make sure that we're clear that we don't, I thought a precedent had been set in the past. So my understanding was that the in lieu fee is based on the number of market rate units, and it doesn't keep increasing as you build more inclusionary units. For example, if we're building 8 market rate units and you multiply that times 15%, that's 1.2 units. We're building 1 inclusionary, which would leave 0.2, and we'll pay the in lieu fee of the 0.2. I noticed in staff's presentation, they count the inclusionary as density, and then it bumps it up to 1.35, and then the 0.35. So I just want to make sure that I'm clear in understanding. We absolutely want to pay our fair share, but I've seen it calculated differently on other projects in the past where it's based on your market rate. That way you're not constantly chasing it. You build more inclusionary, and then your inclusionary requirement gets higher, and you build more and it goes higher. So I think that's just for discussion.
So the inclusionary is based on the total number of units. So whatever your total is, 15% of that has to meet the inclusionary requirements.
But isn't it related to market rate though? So 8 of wouldn't it be multiplied by 8?
No, it's multiplied by the total.
Okay.
To figure out what your inclusionary requirement is.
Okay. Of the total, and then of that total, there's a percentage of that total that needs to be inclusionary or a fee paid.
Yeah, I think there's
But
something in the
I
density
understand.
bonus section that excludes the inclusionary unit from the calculations, but that's not in the inclusionary section. There could be some confusion between those two sections in the code.
I understand what you're saying, but I also think that it's the total number of units,
Sure.
and of that total number of units, a percentage of that needs to be inclusionary. But I understand you're saying like now, but then we're paying again towards the units that we're creating that are inclusionary.
Yeah, it's,
Yes.
I guess an example, if you wanted to do easy math, would be if you had 100, if you're building 100 units, and that would require 15% would be 15 units. And then you said, okay, well, we'll build 15 inclusionary units. Now your density is 115, but now, so the 115 times 15% is now 17 units. So then do you build 2 more units, and now your inclusionary goes up even more? It's like you're chasing it, but
Or is it 85 and then 15? 85 of the units are market rate and 15 are, as opposed to a density bonus, which you probably could do as well, but I think you have to have a certain percentage of affordability. So I think it's not an add-on, I think it's a subtraction, if that makes sense. It's not of the 100, 15 of the 100 would be affordable, not 100 market rate and 15 affordable. Does that make sense? I think it's just, it's either a subtraction or an addition, and I think in this case, or the policy is written as it's a subtraction of the total.
I mean, the language specifically in the inclusionary ordinance says 15% of all new dwelling units in a residential development.
And then there's, I mean, but if there was a desire for a density bonus, then that would be in addition to the 9 units. If you were requesting a density bonus and those additional units were going to be affordable, there would be an allowance, correct? That he could have a percentage.
Right, so
Right.
if you meet your 15% and that allows you a 10% density increase, then that would be tacked on basically
Right.
to your total number of units, and those wouldn't be required to be inclusionary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And if that's how it's applied, I'm great with it. I just wanted to make sure so we didn't have to come back to Planning Commission to resolve an issue of the in lieu fee. So we're happy with building one of the units and paying the rest of it as an in lieu fee.
I appreciate it, and I think it sets a good precedent. So thank you. I have a couple more question comments, or maybe it's just one. I am concerned, maybe we could bring up, because you guys did a revision that we just saw, and I was hoping that it was regarding the duplex, I think it's the duplex units where the roof sheds in front of the garage, and I really...
So, the reason we wanted to slope it towards the front was because it really kind of helped keep that front elevation height down lower. So if we shed it the other way, it's going to make that front elevation much taller.
Yeah.
And that was also the point that was brought up on the triplex from the garage, was it was shed all the way up. And it kind of creates that higher piece, and that's why we had that alternate version. One thing to note is that front piece, the second story, does have an overhang. It does overhang over the garage doors slightly, so there is a little bit of cover at the garage doors. So it's kind of yes, could we do it? Yes, but I think it would have an impact aesthetically to the front elevation that might.
You could raise the windows, I think, concurrently with that shift, and I have such a pet peeve about snow country doors that shed in front of access, and it just that stood out to me. That's why I was surprised when Laura mentioned the design change. I thought, oh great, maybe they shifted those roof lines, but.
We did on the other building.
Yeah.
If that was gonna.
Could I would like the opportunity for you to go back to the drawing board. I mean, obviously we aren't in deliberations, but if there could be a modification and the staff could approve it, I would appreciate it. I do understand. I did look at I know there's a height limit. I know there are constraints, and I understand kind of the massing, but it would be nice to not, just especially with the freezing and thawing and the icicles and the melting.
We're happy to take a look at that, provided staff can make the final approval down the road. We really want to leave tonight with us moving forward.
I would imagine. I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Could we bring up thank you. So the other change was on the triplex, and it was the modification of the roof sloping to the south. Now it slopes to the east. Is that?
That's correct. So if you look over at the altar, so to the lower, the garage to the left, the garage that's lowest on the building, we changed that pitch to slope the other direction, to slope away from the buildings, and so we no longer have that peak coming up at the garage height. And then the other thing that we did on this elevation was at the other two garages, we took the low eyebrow roof from the porch, and we wanted to wrap it across to kind of help break up that wall. So it helps kind of break up the wall a little bit.
That's nice. That's great. I appreciate that.
So it helps clean up that line. So
and
I think
it creates a little shelter above that roof.
And it creates a little shelter.
Door, yeah.
Also, with the alternate on the elevation on the garage, we took that roof and did a little bit overhang to create some cover at the trash. So we tried to take advantage of the combo. It was a good one. So we said, okay, how can we use it to make it better?
Yeah. No, and I think this is a real improvement. So I would encourage that if you could spend a little time on the duplex, that garage roof if possible, or maybe making the roof a little shallower. But
there's kind of two options on that other garage. One is to bring the peak up and maybe try to break it up with where you have a shallow roof in the front. Like kind of create a little step there. So you really you might have a little bit of eave, but let's say you keep it to a few feet, so you're minimizing the amount of snow that's going to come off of it. That could be an option. Another option we could look at is instead of doing a shed, we could look at doing a gable. I was trying to keep the aesthetics all consistent with the shed.
Yeah,
and so that's kind of why I didn't go to the gable earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that. I would just say if a little more time could be put in, just thinking about it would be great. I'd appreciate that. I think that's all I have in terms of questions.
I have a couple. So I have been out at the site, but it's hard to envision what it'll look like with all the, the trees removed. I just wanted to make sure that the retaining walls, that there's landscaping and that sort of thing to help buffer that from the downhill residences. I mean,
absolutely. So so on the downhill side, there's essentially two retaining walls, and they happen between two buildings. And then the way we've always conceived of that is that the reason we stepped them was so that we could landscape. It would help buffer that. One option that Rob and I discussed on the way up was possibly adding a third tier to that. That's pretty costly to have 3 steps of a foundation, but it would give us the opportunity to basically pull it back off of the turnaround, a couple additional feet at the top, step down. It would bring the height under the 5 feet, which was one of the comments that was brought up. And then it would also kind of allow you to soften it even more by having essentially you'd have 2 tiers on that area that you could landscape.
What kind of materials do you envision for the retaining wall?
Currently, we're showing board form concrete, kind of to match with the architecture that's happening on the front of the buildings, and that's kind of what I discussed with the contractor also.
Yeah, no, I like that. Let me just really quick check. Yeah, that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you.
Need to rush you. I didn't know if you were done. Okay. I just want to say thanks. I really think that alternate design looks really nice. can you show me, it looks like you said there were 6 areas of infiltration. I kind of see 4 on that map. Am I missing that? I'm sorry, you're going to have to switch back
You
and
might
forth
need to
between
grab the
two.
mic.
Is there, do we have a mic?
I think we can pull it out of the usual one. Pull it out.
Just-
Oh, here he comes.
Here we go.
If you want to walk up and point, you just have to take the mic with you, but that would be,
If you unplug it, will it?
I don't know, but here comes one for you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I believe there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Got it.
So basically the concept was to treat everything as close to the source as possible. So these uphill, we're going to go this direction over to be treated here. Most of this area was going to be treated here, then here, and some of this was going to come off to here. Everything eventually ends up back to sheet flow. This goes here, and then everything down to here. Originally, what we had was 2 large basins that everything was kind of going down to these 2, and we discussed with engineering that it was more preferable to treat everything close to the source, slow things down, so that you just don't get inundation here, and then all the water goes off to the adjacent. So.
That's great, thank you. I just had forgotten about those other 2 little spots over there. Let's see. I don't know where to go now, but so the landscape plan has a lot of aspens, and I can't remember what the other one was, a red twig dogwood.
Yeah.
Both of those are high water needs plants, aren't they?
They are. They're not. I know one of the questions was it a wetlands plant, and it could grow in wet soil and dry soil, and they're also both good for stabilizing slopes. So that's why they were chosen. But certainly we could trade those out for something more drought tolerant that would be just as good. That was just one option, and it was good for slopes, and it could also grow in dry soils.
Okay, I did see that they were good for slopes. I didn't know they could grow in both, so great. And then, so the light fixtures, if you look at the cut sheets for those that are in our package, they all say that they are not dark skies compliant. And so I don't know if I'm reading something different.
No, I apologize for that. There was the fixtures, the initial fixtures that we submitted do have a slight little curve on that lens, which I think takes them out of being compliant. And that's why we did provide some alternates. So the alternates are listed with the manufacturer data that we provided, are listed as dark sky compliant. And so the ones that I would foresee is the bronze pitch single would be the one that would be the wall one. And then for the pendant, it would be the ash pendant with the drop. So it would be the one to the right instead of the Roton 12-inch. The Circu, I think is how you say that, small, that one is listed under the manufacturer as dark sky compliant, I saw. And that only really happens at the triplex. And it's mounted directly to the ceiling at that.
And that one said it's compliant as long as it's ceiling mounted. So yeah.
And it is, yeah.
Great. I do like the idea of actually being night skies compliant. So I'm in favor of that.
We were fooled by we didn't really catch the slight sliver of glass to the side. So sorry.
And I guess the sconces as well, or are they open at the top? Do we know?
I don't believe the ones. I don't believe they're open to the top, but the manufacturer's data didn't say they were dark sky, so that's why I provided the alternate.
It says they're not dark sky as well. The Aspenti is not either.
So going forward, what we would be proposing to use is the pitch single, and the ash pendant option.
Great, thank you. Okay, so the retaining walls, when you say it's poured concrete, board formed poured concrete, I think is what you said. So that's just gray concrete color. Is that what that looks like?
Currently, we didn't specify a colored concrete, so it would be a gray colored concrete. Yeah.
And that's kind of what's on the sort of visible foundations of the buildings?
Visual foundations in the front at the porches where you have the steps up you have a board formed concrete that pulls across at the porches on the fronts.
I don't, is that a general, is that, do they look like that most of the time, or, I mean,
So when so think of it. So there's a couple ways to think of the board form. So historically, the board form was a larger board that 2x10, where you'd see a little bit of texture come through. I think we're proposing. I don't know if we called it out, but I think we're proposing an 8-inch board, which would allow a little bit more texture to come through and read through. So you kind of increase the horizontal lines coming across that. And the other thing, nice thing about it is if you use a natural wood, then you actually get some graining on the surface. And so it's kind of a nice kind of way to develop a little bit of texture and be kind of true to the material.
okay.
I could add that board formed concrete is stuff we use on retaining walls in our streetscape projects and other places around town as well.
Great, thank you. And then, are we concerned about the garages on the north side filling up with water? Is there a slight slope back into that common road?
The driveway, I mean, you can speak to this, but this driveway does slope slightly back towards the common area.
I think that's everything that I had.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions?
One more quick retaining wall question. On the triplex, looks like there's patios on the south side.
Correct.
And those you do the same board form concrete.
Correct.
Okay.
Anyone else? Any more questions?
I'm still a bit dubious about blowing that snow around a 90-degree angle behind that building, but I can see how it'll have tons of space because it's a big downhill.
Well, they can kind of direct where it shoots, right?
If you want to pull up that map again, it literally goes around a 90-degree angle.
We can move part of it to the west. And like I said, we generate these snow storage to meet the 50% requirement. People are going to put the snow where it makes the most sense. And the code does allow us to go less than 50% if there's areas to build it up. And that's a great area to do that. So snow storage isn't going to be an issue at all. It's going to be real easy to blow it right over the top of those walls and down below into near the retention basins.
Oh, and I did have just one more quick question while we're on this page. Is there any way to save any one of these mature trees? I sort of mentioned it before.
We'll certainly try in final design. We want to save as many trees as possible. Typically, we try to be real conservative and realistic about what we're going to lose, and then we try to save as much as we can. It's a little deceiving. It shows that almost all the trees are gone. When you go out there, there's a lot of trees that aren't shown on the map because they're less than 8 inches. So we survey in all the 8-inch and larger trees, and there are some smaller trees, a lot of that will remain, but it's always our intent to save as many trees, especially the real mature trees. There's one off the end of the cul-de-sac that's kind of, or off the end of the project, not really a cul-de-sac, but at the end of the driveway, and we'd really love to save that. It's kind of one of those borderline, and it's going to just depend on the grading, so we're going to try to fine-tune it and save what we can.
I think that's the one there that's not X'd off, but it's not green either.
Oh, I see yeah, right.
That's it? Can you see where she's circling?
Yeah, I think that's the one.
Great. Well, thank you so much for trying.
Anything else? You may be seated. Thank you. Okay, should we move forward with deliberations? Yeah? Okay. Maybe we should discuss the CEQA exemption so we can build consensus or figure out our thoughts there. Great. Oh, thank you. Susie, did you have any, I know this was something you were hung up with in the beginning. Do you feel better about this?
I do feel better, yeah. Actually, relating it to the existing projects that are to the west of it, yeah, now I feel like I have something to compare it to, whereas I was feeling slippery before.
Yeah, I get that. How about you? You okay? Jerusha?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with either.
Great. Do we need to decide which one we want to support, the top one or the bottom, the one about infill or the one regarding the significant effects?
Yeah, you would need to choose one. You could choose either. Our recommendation would be to go with the infill one.
Yeah, that was where I was leaning. As I've reviewed this project, I definitely see it as serving a purpose from an infill standpoint, as well as similar development in this location of the town.
I have unfortunately, that's going to have a question for me, because wasn't there a requirement for the infill one that there was no species of concern, or has there been the studies done for that?
It says that the project site has no value as habitat for endangered, rare, or threatened species. And based on our knowledge of that part of town, we don't think that that is the case.
And our site assessment. So I think Laura explained this in an email earlier, that when we first get projects in, we go through and do a site assessment. And we had the ability with this project site to do that before the snow hit. So we did have that kind of basis. And then we go through and look at all of the key factors for our known endangered species within town. So whether it's, yellow warbler, or if it's a Plumas savacea plant species, whatever it is, we know those critical features of those habitats, and we do our own assessment when we're out on these sites. So we did that as part of our initial review and didn't find anything that was unique or unusual.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Planners wear many hats. We are biologists, we are attorneys, we're many things.
Because I thought we were going the other way, I didn't really pursue these questions. And so I feel like, again, that was news to me and not in the staff report. Did I miss it, or?
That's just all part of how we decide what exemption to propose. And so Laura had two options for you, just because now the plan development's not proposed. So we just put that there for you.
We could go with the other one if you're more comfortable. I'm comfortable with either. I feel like this area has been vetted both with, I think, Hilltop in terms of environmental review and Stone Bridge. I can never remember Stonewood, one of the stones, Stonebridge Ridgewood. So I feel pretty comfortable about moving forward. And
so I guess what I'm concerned is that, because I do live in the neighborhood and we occasionally see really cool owls in the trees, and I'm not a biologist, I don't know if they're rare, but we don't see them very often. We occasionally see birds of prey, which to me seem significant.
Yeah, I mean, those are not protected special status species. So there are a lot of different bird species that habitate in Sierra Meadows, but they're not ones that are on the known list that we have. And so it's very easy for us to go through and look at that, and we're confident that it's not an issue.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing it up. So we'll move forward. Comfortable. We'll go with the infill, and then we can move on. Let's see. I don't have a list of kind of significant issues. Some of the issues that were raised were with regards to the snow storage and the earth retention. What about there was the design change? Are we good with the?
Yeah, I like the design change.
I like it as well.
We require the alternate design.
Yeah. And then to further that, I personally would like a study or effort made to find a way not to shed in front of the garage doors. It doesn't need to be a do or die, but I would love that would.
So is that like building in a condition, or is that like?
It's more of a recommendation.
Okay.
Encourage. I don't think it needs to be a condition.
It's whatever level you want. If you just want to say encourage, then that's sort of part of your findings. If you want to make it a condition, you can. The Planning Commission in the past has done that, where you'll suggest that the applicant and staff work together to consider alternatives.
That's what I was that was my thought when we were talking, was it would be you guys work together to try to come up with a better plan for how the roof line is designed.
If they did gutters and snow retention, would that suffice?
I think it would help. Yeah, I recognize that's an added cost, but I think it would be a benefit overall.
Just to give them an option if they go
Yes.
through the exercise and find that changing the roof line is not the best option.
No, I appreciate your suggestion. Yeah, I think that would help address the concern I'm having.
Maybe the condition could include that as, for example, here's some things that could be considered.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that works.
Okay, great. And then snow storage, are you guys okay? Do you feel comfortable with what's
I mean, ultimately, they
proposed?
have to move the snow.
Right, exactly.
And
That's
it's gonna
kind of
fit.
my feeling, and I do agree. I think there is adequate space on the site, and there is this buffer. So,
And I feel much better about that, knowing that that is a permanent open space that they're
Yeah.
abutting. I didn't
Right.
know if that was open for development in the future.
development, yeah. And I feel better regarding the earth retention, that the driveways on that north side aren't going to have built retention. It's, almost at grade. I like board form concrete. That, you made a face. I like it.
It sounds like a prison yard to me,
No,
but I'm not an architect, so I don't know.
My architecture background was in a school where that was very common and prevalent, and so I've always appreciated. I love concrete. Yeah, I know for some that's odd, but
And I do like our features downtown, so I must not hate it that much.
a lot of the retaining walls and structures. So, yep. Okay. Were there
And
any
I just
other?
wanted to say nice job. I know that's a really tough site, and you guys, you did it.
Yeah, I appreciate that effort as well, and I appreciate that the merging the two lots. I think that is such a benefit from having two different lots with two different, ease or access, ingress and egress, and I think it makes a lot of sense. So
There was one more issue of the lighting and how you guys felt about the newer lighting that was night skies compliant.
I prefer the new lighting that was proposed. I didn't know you could do non-compliant night sky lighting.
We would require it through the building permit.
That's what
for it
I-
to be
yeah,
compliant.
so
But if
it
you want to
didn't-
specify that those fixtures
I-
should be in the plan set, we can do that.
I would like that, and I liked the second round, and so, yeah. But thank you for bringing that up. Was there anything else? I think we're ready for a motion if we can go there.
I'll make a motion that the Planning Commission adopt Resolution 2020-02, approving the development permit, use permit, and tentative map, and determining the project categorically exempt from CEQA per Section 15332 of the CEQA guidelines,
Great.
and the revised conditions.
Second that.
Okay, great. Emily, may we have a roll call?
Commissioner Tarnay,
Yes.
Commissioner Hall,
Yes.
Chair Riley,
Yes.
and Commissioner Freeman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Okay. Are you guys okay moving on without a break? Because we're almost done? Okay, good. Then we will move on to item number 9, staff reports. Looks like there are none, unless anything's changed in since our agenda came out. Information items, number 10.
Sure. I'll cover that quickly. We have 2 items for sure next month on the commission's calendar. We have a cell tower that is proposed off of Highway 89 South, kind of near the Save Mart Shopping Center. And then we have the affordable housing project that we've been calling Frischman Hollow 2. That's located off of Highway 89 North. And then we have 2 potential projects that may move forward, but we're not sure at this point. One would be a carport at the Fast Lane gas station just right over here, and then potentially a subdivision and historic demolition on West River Street in the downtown. So those are 2 question marks. Potentially, we'll know in the next week or so whether those are going to move forward. But we for sure have two projects. And then I believe that Caitlin Brennan sent out an email checking on the commission's availability during the hearing, because it is technically scheduled during Ski Skate Week, and we'll probably be in touch once we hear from a majority with a possible confirmation of that date, or we may look at some other dates if that doesn't work. So stay tuned for that.
Great. Thank you, Jenna. Commission member reports. Susie, you want to make a
Oddly enough, it's very quick this time. Let's see, Town Council, January 14th. Our GPAC meeting was canceled for January 16th. And there was a Good Morning Truckee also on that January 14th. And then I went to the Women's March downtown on Saturday.
Good job.
I don't have anything to report.
Dan, do you have anything?
No
to
reports.
report? I don't have anything to report. I mean, I did go to GPAC, but I can't remember when that was. And I thank you for canceling the one because of the snowstorm. I didn't want anyone on the road, and I'm glad I didn't have to get on the road for that.
Oh, I'll just say I couldn't make the February meeting if it sticks with the current date.
Same.
I can't, yeah, okay.
I would also miss it.
Okay, so maybe we should look at changing that. So I don't know if it matters, but I think having more of us than less, especially given at least one of these items is a big item, likely to have some robust public comment. I would love to have more commission members than fewer. So.
Did each of you let Caitlin know that, or should we let her know? Okay, you let her know.
I have not let her know yet.
Okay.
So if you could let her know, that'd be great.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Okay. So with that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting to the next planning commission meeting, which as a yet to be determined date, most likely in February.